The ice wind cut through the metal walls of the hidden shelter like frozen knives. Elder Velenara pulled her warm coat closer around her thin shoulders as she watched the last of her people work at the old communication array. Her 6 arms moved with practiced skill across the control panel, but her heart felt heavy with despair. 3 months had passed since the Zephyrians came. 3 months since her beautiful world turned into a nightmare of smoke and death. The crystal gardens that had taken her people 1,000 years to grow were now nothing but broken glass and empty holes in the ground. The great cities where millions of Villani had lived and worked were silent ruins filled only with the clicking sounds of the invaders. The communication array sparked and hummed to life. Velenara felt a small flutter of hope in her chest. Maybe someone out there would hear them. Maybe someone would care enough to help. She began to record the message that might be their last chance. This is Elder Velenara of the Villani people on planet Cathara Prime. We are sending this message to anyone who will listen. Our world has been taken by the Zephyrians. They came 3 months ago with ships that blocked out our sun. They did not ask for surrender. They did not try to talk. They just began taking everything we had built. Her voice cracked a little as she continued. We are not warriors. We are gardeners and artists and teachers. We built crystal sculptures that sang in the wind and grew food that could feed anyone who was hungry. We never hurt anyone. We never took anything that was not ours, but that did not matter to them. Around her in the ice cave, the last 300 survivors of her people listened to her words. Children pressed close to their parents. Old ones, like herself, sat quietly, their eyes dim with sorrow. They had been farmers and builders and dreamers. Now they were refugees hiding in frozen caves, waiting for death to find them. The Zephyrians do not just want our planet, Velenara said into the transmitter. They want us. They have machines that go into the mind and make people into slaves. We have seen our friends and family walking around with dead eyes, digging in the mines until they fall down and do not get up again. This is not war. This is something worse. She paused to wipe tears from her large eyes. Outside the cave, she could hear the distant sound of Zephyrian aircraft searching for them. It would not be long now. If anyone receives this message, please know that we tried to be good neighbors to the galaxy. We sent food to hungry worlds and medicine to the sick. We asked for nothing in return except to be left in peace. If you have the power to stop what is happening here, please help us. If you cannot help us, please remember that we existed. Please remember that we tried to do good things. The message finished recording. Velenara set the transmitter to broadcast the signal across every frequency she knew. Then she sat back and waited. There was nothing else to do now except hope that someone, somewhere, would hear them and care. The message traveled through space at the speed of light, racing past empty planets and dead stars. It bounced off relay stations and communication satellites. Most species that received it deleted it without listening. The Galactic Council marked it as low priority and filed it away. The few civilizations that did listen shook their heads sadly and moved on to other business. Everyone knew about the Zephyrians. Everyone knew they were too dangerous to fight, but the message kept traveling deep in human space, orbiting the blue and green world that other species whispered about. In fearful tones, Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his command center drinking his morning coffee. The orbital station where he worked was bigger than most cities, with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop small suns. Around him, thousands of human military personnel went about their daily work of keeping the galaxies. Most dangerous species organized and pointed in the right direction. Morrison was not a young man anymore. His hair was gray and his face was marked with scars from the Proxima Wars 20 years ago. He had seen enough fighting to last several lifetimes. But he still came to work every day because someone had to keep an eye on things. Someone had to make sure that when humans went out into the galaxy, they went out the right way. His communication officer, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes, brought him the morning reports. Lisa was sharp and quick with the kind of mind that could process 100 different signals at once and still catch the one that mattered. She had been working with Morrison for 5 years, and he trusted her judgment completely. "Sir, we have something unusual in the overnight transmissions," Lisa said, handing him a datapad. "Distress signal from the Cathara system. Species called the Villani. Looks like they are being invaded by the Zephyrians." Morrison looked up from his coffee. "Zephyrians? I thought the Council was handling that situation." "They declared it too dangerous to intervene, sir." Standard Council response. They sent thoughts and prayers. Morrison read through the message transcript, his face growing darker with each line. When he finished, he set the pad down on his desk and was quiet for a long moment. "Lisa, what do we know about the Villani?" he asked. "Good people, from what intelligence tells us. They grow food crystals that they share with half the sector. Never been in a war that anyone can remember. The kind of neighbors you want to have." Morrison nodded slowly. He had read the reports about the Zephyrians before. Hive mind species that treated other life forms like cattle. They would strip a world bare and move on to the next one, leaving nothing but empty space and broken dreams behind them. The Council was right about one thing. They were dangerous. That was exactly why. Morrison was going to do something about it. He picked up his secure communicator and opened a channel to the shipyards. "This is Admiral Morrison. I need to speak to Captain Danny Brooks. Tell him I have a job for the Retribution." Captain Danny Brooks stood in the armory of the UHS Retribution, watching his crew prepare for another mission that would probably get them all killed. He was not worried about this. Danny had been getting into fights that should have killed him since he was old enough to hold a weapon, and he was still here. His crew was the same way. They were all volunteers who had specifically asked to serve on the ship that took the jobs no one else wanted. The Retribution was not like other ships in the human fleet, where most vessels were built for exploration or trade protection. The Retribution was built for one thing only: solving problems that required extreme violence applied with surgical precision. It was a heavy assault cruiser that looked like someone had taken a city block and covered it with guns. The ship carried enough firepower to level a continent, and enough armor to fly through the middle of a star. Danny walked through the corridors of his ship, checking on the preparations. In the engineering section, Chief Tony Martinez was running diagnostics on weapon systems that were technically illegal under 17 different galactic treaties. Tony was a short, stocky man with grease under his fingernails and a smile that suggested he enjoyed working with things that exploded. He had been building weapons for the human military for 15 years, and he took personal pride in making sure they worked exactly when they were needed. "How are we looking, Tony?" Danny asked. "Good to go, Captain," Tony replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "All primary systems are green. The new plasma cannons are calibrated and ready. The kinetic bombardment system is loaded with the good stuff. And I made some improvements to the shield generators that should let us take a few more hits before things get interesting." Danny nodded. Tony's improvements usually meant that something which should have been impossible was now merely extremely dangerous. That was exactly what they needed. He moved on to the medical bay, where Dr. Amy Roberts was checking her equipment. Amy was the ship's xenobiologist and medical officer, a combination that was useful when dealing with alien species who might need either healing or detailed analysis. She was a tall woman with steady hands and the kind of calm personality that could perform surgery during a space battle without breaking a sweat. "Amy, what do we know about the Villani and the Zephyrians?" Danny asked. "The Villani are standard carbon-based humanoids," Amy said, pulling up data on her screen. "Peaceful agricultural species. No known military capabilities. They have been sending food aid to their neighbors for over a century. The kind of people who would give you their last meal if you looked hungry." She switched to another screen. "The Zephyrians are the opposite. Hive mind insectoids. They reproduce by conquering other species and converting them into slave workers. No individual identity. No concept of mercy or negotiation. They see other life forms as resources to be harvested." "How many worlds have they taken?" Danny asked. 17. "Confirmed. Probably more that we do not know about. Each time, they strip the planet completely and move on." Nothing left alive. The Galactic Council has been tracking them for 50 years, but never found a way to stop them. Danny smiled. It was not a nice smile. Well, they never asked humans to try. His next stop was the bridge, where Commander Kate Sullivan was running tactical simulations. Kate was Danny's first officer and the smartest person on the ship. She had graduated from the military academy at the top of her class and could calculate, firing solutions in her head while dodging enemy fire. She was also completely insane by normal standards, which made her perfect for serving on the Retribution. "Kate, what is our tactical situation?" Danny asked. "Not good, sir," Kate replied, bringing up a holographic display of the Cathara system. "Intelligence reports show over 200 Zephyrian ships in the system. They have complete orbital control and are strip mining the planet. The Villani survivors are scattered and hiding. We will be outnumbered by about 50 to 1. Demi studied the display. Most captains would have looked at those odds and requested backup. Danny looked at those odds and started planning how to make the enemy wish they had brought more ships. "What about their fleet composition?" he asked. "Mix of mining vessels and escort fighters, a few heavy cruisers for system defense." "The mining ships are not military grade, but they are big and have a lot of industrial equipment that could be dangerous. The fighters are fast but lightly armored. The cruisers are the real threat. They have shields and weapons designed for ship-to-ship combat." Kate paused and looked at Danny. "Sir, this is going to be a rough one. Are you sure we should not wait for backup?" Danny shook his head. "The Villani do not have time for us to wait. For backup? Besides, when has this crew ever done anything the easy way?" Kate grinned. "Good point, sir. I will start working on attack patterns." Danny left the bridge and headed to the ship's briefing room, where the rest of his senior staff was waiting. These were the people who would help him turn an impossible rescue mission into another victory for the human fleet. They were all dangerous people who had volunteered for dangerous work, and Danny trusted them with his life on a regular basis. Sergeant Nick Campbell was there, representing the ship's ground assault team. Nick was a demolitions expert who could turn anything into a bomb and had never met an explosion he did not like. He was built like a tank and moved like a cat, with the kind of reflexes that came from years of combat in places where being slow got you killed. Lieutenant Rachel Moore was the ship's best pilot. She could fly anything with engines through places that should have been impossible to navigate. She had once piloted a dropship through an asteroid field during a meteor storm while under enemy fire, and she still complained that the mission had been too easy. Commander Pete Jackson led the ship's special operations team. Pete was a former Special Forces operative who specialized in infiltration and reconnaissance. He could walk into an enemy base, gather intelligence, plant explosives, and walk out again without anyone knowing he had been there. He was also very good at teaching other people how to do the same thing. Danny looked around the room at his people. They were all waiting for him to tell them what impossible thing they were going to do next. "Ladies and gentlemen," Danny said, "we have received a distress call from the Villani people in the Cathara system. They are being invaded by the Zephyrians. The Galactic Council has decided that the situation is too dangerous to handle. They are wrong. We are going to handle it." He activated the holographic display showing the enemy fleet. "We are going in alone against 200 enemy ships to rescue a species that has never hurt anyone. We will be outnumbered, outgunned, and operating in hostile territory with no backup. The enemy has had 3 months to dig in and prepare their defenses. This mission will probably kill us all." Danny paused and looked at each of his officers. "Any questions?" Nick Campbell raised his hand. "Sir, will we get to use the new explosives?" "Yes, Nick, you will get to use all the new explosives." Rachel Moore spoke up. "Captain, will there be any flying that normal people would consider suicidal?" "Definitely, Rachel. I am counting on it." Pete Jackson nodded approvingly. "Sounds like a normal Tuesday for this crew, sir." Danny smiled. This was why he loved his job. Other ship captains had to deal with crew members who worried about things like survival and following regulations. Danny had crew members who worried about whether they would get to use enough explosives. All right, people, we jump to hyperspace in 6 hours. Kate, I want attack patterns for hitting their mining operations first. Tony, make sure all our weapons are loaded with the nastiest ammunition we have. Amy, prepare the medical bay for casualties and start researching Zephyrian biology. I want to know how to kill them efficiently. He looked around the room one more time. The Zephyrians think they can do whatever they want because nobody has ever been able to stop them. They are about to learn why the galaxy is afraid of humans. Let's go show these bugs what happens when they mess with our neighbors. The Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Cathara system like a metal predator entering a feeding ground. Captain Danny Brooks stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display show him exactly how bad their situation was. 237 enemy ships filled the space around the planet, their hulls dark against the stars. Mining platforms the size of cities hung in orbit, tearing chunks of rock and crystal from the surface below. Stealth systems active. Commander Kate Sullivan reported from her station. We are invisible to their sensors, but it will not last long once we get closer. Danny nodded. The Retribution's stealth technology was some of the best in human space, but it had limits. They could hide from passive sensors, but if they got too close or started shooting, every ship in the system would know exactly where they were. US and slow, Danny ordered. I want to get a good look at what we are dealing with before we announce ourselves. The ship moved through space like a ghost, sliding between the outer patrol ships without being detected. Danny watched the enemy fleet through the view screen. Studying their formations and trying to identify their command structure, the Zephyrians were organized. He had to give them that. They had set up defensive perimeters around the mining operations and maintained regular patrol routes through the system. They were also completely focused on the planet below. None of their ships were watching for threats from outside the system. It was the kind of mistake that species made when they had never encountered humans before. Captain, Dr. Amy Roberts called from her science station. I am detecting life signs. On the surface. Approximately 300 Villani in the northern ice region. They appear to be in some kind of underground shelter. Any sign of Zephyrian ground forces? Danny asked. Yes, sir. Large concentrations around the major mining sites. I'm also detecting what looks like processing facilities. Based on the energy signatures, they are using some kind of neural modification equipment. Danny felt his jaw tighten. The Zephyrians were not just stealing resources. They were turning people into slaves. That changed everything. Kate, prep a stealth shuttle. I want a ground team down there to make contact with the survivors. Pete, you are leading the mission. Take a small team and find out what the situation is on the surface. Commander Pete Jackson nodded from his position near the tactical display. Understood, sir. How long do we have before you start the party up here? Give me 6 hours. Get down there, make contact, and get back to the ship. Once you are clear, we go loud? 20 minutes later, a small shuttle detached from the Retribution's belly and began its descent toward the planet. The shuttle was painted flat, black, and covered with sensor-dampening materials that made it nearly invisible to detection systems. Inside, Pete Jackson led a team of 6 specialists, each one trained to operate in hostile territory and survive situations that would kill normal people. The shuttle landed in a snowfield, 50 kilometers from the Villani shelter. Pete and his team stepped out into air that was cold enough to freeze normal human blood. They were not normal humans. Their environmental suits kept them warm, and their enhanced physiology let them breathe the thin atmosphere without difficulty. They moved across the ice like wolves, fast and silent. The Villani shelter was hidden in a network of natural caves that had been expanded over generations. Pete's team found the entrance and slipped inside, without triggering any of the simple alarm systems the survivors had set up. They moved through dark tunnels lit only by the faint glow of their suit displays, following life sign readings toward the main chamber. Elder Velanara was checking the communication array when the humans appeared out of the shadows like armored ghosts. She stumbled backward in surprise, her 6 arms flailing as she tried to reach the alarm button. She had never seen anything like these creatures before. They were tall and broad, covered in armor that made them look like metal monsters. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors that reflected the cave lights like the eyes of predators. "Please do not be afraid," Pete said, his voice coming through the suit's external speakers. "We received your message. We are here to help." Velanara stopped trying to reach the alarm. The voice was strange, deeper than any Villani voice, but it sounded gentle. You came? Someone actually came?" Pete reached up and removed his helmet, revealing a human face. Velanara had never seen a human before, but she had heard stories. The galaxy was full of whispered tales about the species from the Death World, the ones who fought wars in places that would kill other life forms. Looking at Pete's scarred face and steady eyes, she could believe those stories. "We are humans," Pete said. "We got your distress call. We are here to fix this problem." Other Villani began to gather around them, drawn by the sound of voices. They stared at the humans with mixtures of hope and fear. These creatures were clearly dangerous, but they had come in response to a plea for help. That had to mean something. "How many of you are there?" Velanara asked. "On the planet right now?" 7, Pete replied. "In the system? About 300. Velanara's hope began to fade. "Only 300? But there are thousands of Zephyrians up there, hundreds of ships. How can 300 beings fight against so many?" One of Pete's team members, a woman with short blonde hair and the kind of smile that suggested she enjoyed dangerous situations, spoke up. "Ma'am, you have not seen what 300 humans can do when they are properly motivated." Pete pulled out a portable scanner and began taking readings of the cave system. "We need to know everything about the Zephyrian operations." "How many? Ground forces do they have? Where are their command centers? What kind of equipment are they using for the neural modifications?" Velanara led them deeper into the cave system, where the other survivors had set up a crude intelligence center. Maps covered the walls showing Zephyrian positions and patrol. Routes data screens displayed information about mining operations and slave processing facilities. "They have about 5,000 ground troops," Velanara explained. "Most of them are concentrated around the 3 main mining sites. The neural modification equipment is in the capital city, along with their command center. They are using our own people as workers, but the mines are not their own anymore." Pete studied the information, his expression growing darker. "How many enslaved Villani are there?" "We estimate about 50,000. They were taken in the first weeks of the invasion. We have tried to get close to the processing centers, but our people are not fighters. We do not know how to fight against something like this." "That is all right," Pete said. "Fighting is what we do." "Are the neural modifications reversible?" Dr. Amy Roberts, who had been monitoring the conversation through Pete's communication link, spoke through his helmet radio. "Pete, tell them we can reverse the modifications. It will take time and the right equipment, but we can fix this." Pete relayed the information to Velanara, who began to cry. After 3 months of despair, someone was finally offering real hope. "What do you need?" "From us?" she asked. "Just stay hidden and keep your people safe," Pete replied. "In about 5 hours, things are going to get very loud up there. When the shooting starts, do not come out of these caves until we come to get you. We are going to solve this problem, but we are going to solve it in a way that might frighten you." He looked around at the gathered Villani, making sure they understood. "We are not going to drive the Zephyrians away. We are not going to negotiate with them or try to find a peaceful solution. We are going to destroy them completely. Every ship, every soldier, every piece of equipment they brought to your world. When we are finished, there will be nothing left of their presence here." Velanara stared at him. "You can do that? Against so many?" Pete's smile was cold and dangerous. "Ma'am, we are humans. We are from a planet that tries to kill us every single day. We have been fighting impossible odds since we first crawled out of our caves. The Zephyrians made one mistake when they came to your world." "What mistake?" Velanara asked. "They hurt people we have decided to protect. That makes this personal." Pete and his team prepared to leave the cave system. As they walked back toward their shuttle, Velanara called after them. "Why are you doing this? You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you in return." Pete stopped and turned back to her. "Ma'am, you send out a call for help." "That is all the reason we need. In human culture, when someone asks for help, you help them. When someone hurts your neighbors, you hurt them back. It is not complicated." The shuttle lifted off from the ice field and began its journey back to the Retribution. Pete sat in the passenger compartment, reviewing the intelligence they had gathered in planning the mission that would follow. On the ship, Captain Danny Brooks received Pete's report and felt his anger grow cold and focused. 50,000 enslaved. People, neural modification equipment. A species that treated other life forms like cattle. He opened a communication channel to Admiral Morrison. "So this is Captain Brooks. We have completed our reconnaissance. The situation is worse than we thought. Requesting permission to implement Protocol 7. The response came back immediately. Permission granted, Captain. Show them what happens when they hurt our neighbors." The Retribution dropped its stealth systems and appeared on every Zephyrian sensor in the system like a nightmare materializing from empty space. For 3 months, the hive mind had felt secure in their conquest of the crystal world. They had faced no resistance, encountered no threats, and grown comfortable in their absolute control. That comfort died in the first second of human contact. Captain Danny Brooks stood on the bridge, watching the enemy fleet scramble to respond to their sudden appearance. "Kate, target the 3 largest mining platforms. I want them gone in the first volley." Commander Kate Sullivan's fingers danced across her weapons console. Plasma cannons charged and locked. "Kinetic bombardment system ready, all weapons green. Fire!" The space around Cathara Prime lit up like a new star being born. 3 streams of superheated plasma lanced out from the Retribution, each one carrying enough energy to melt a mountain. They struck the massive mining platforms simultaneously, and the structures simply ceased to exist. Metal and crystal vaporized. In balls of white fire that could be seen from the planet's surface, the Zephyrian hive mind experienced something it had never felt before. For the first time in their species' history, they were surprised. The emotion rippled through every connected consciousness in the system, causing confusion and panic among creatures that had never known fear. "Enemy fleet is moving to intercept," Kate reported. "Looks like they are finally paying attention to us," Danny smiled. "Good. Tony, how are our shields?" Chief Tony Martinez called from the engineering station. "Solid as a rock, Captain. I made those improvements I told you about. We can take whatever they throw at us." The first wave of Zephyrian fighters reached them seconds later. 50 sleek vessels that moved like angry insects, firing energy beams. That would have crippled most ships. The beams struck the Retribution's shields and scattered like raindrops hitting a stone wall. The human ship did not even slow down. "Their weapons are not getting through our defenses," Tony reported with satisfaction. "Whatever they used to conquer other species, it is not going to work on us." Danny opened a communication channel that broadcast to every ship in the system. When he spoke, his voice carried the cold promise of violence that had made humans famous across the galaxy. "Attention, Zephyrian forces. This is Captain Danny Brooks of the human warship Retribution. You have attacked and enslaved a peaceful species. You have 60 seconds to begin evacuating this system. After that, we will remove you ourselves." The response came back in the form of clicking sounds and electronic noise that the ship's computer translated into speech. "Unknown vessel, you are outnumbered. Surrender and be processed. Resistance is pointless." Danny looked at Kate. "I think they just told us to surrender," Kate grinned. "That is adorable. Should we tell them what humans do when bugs try to intimidate us?" "I think we should show them instead. All weapons, open fire. Let's clean house." What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration of why the galaxy feared humans. The Retribution moved through the Zephyrian fleet like a shark through a school of fish, destroying everything it touched. Human weapons technology, designed by a species that had been fighting wars since before they discovered fire, proved to be several generations ahead of anything the hive mind had encountered. Plasma cannons melted through Zephyrian armor like it was made of paper. Kinetic bombardment rounds accelerated to near light speed, punched holes through enemy ships from one side to the other. Missile systems launched smart weapons that hunted down targets and exploded with nuclear fire. The Zephyrians tried to swarm the human ship, surrounding it with hundreds of fighters and smaller vessels. This was a tactic that had worked against other species. It did not work against humans. The Retribution's point defense systems came online, filling the space around the ship with thousands of laser beams and small projectiles. Every enemy fighter that came within range was destroyed in seconds. Enemy casualties are mounting rapidly, Kate reported. We have destroyed 60 ships in the last 5 minutes. They are not adapting to our tactics. That is because they are a hive mind, Dr. Amy Roberts called from her station. They think collectively, which means they learn slowly. They keep trying the same attacks because they cannot understand why their usual methods are not working. Danny nodded. Then let's give them something new to think about. Launch ground assault teams, it is time to visit the surface. Sergeant Nick Campbell had been waiting for this order. He led 200 human soldiers into drop pods that launched from the Retribution like falling stars. Each pod was designed to survive atmospheric entry and impact with the ground, delivering its cargo of heavily armed humans. Directly into enemy territory, the pod slammed into the surface of Cathara, prime around the 3 main Zephyrian ground installations. They opened like metal flowers, and humans in powered armor stepped out into the toxic atmosphere that had kept other species away from the planet. The humans breathed it like it was fresh air. Nick looked around at the alien landscape and keyed his radio. All teams, this is Bulldog. We are on the ground and operational. Let's go introduce ourselves to the neighbors. The Zephyrian ground forces had never faced humans before. They were used to fighting species that needed special equipment to survive in hostile environments, who moved slowly and carefully to avoid injury. Humans ran across broken ground like they were jogging through a park. They used explosives in ways that defied logic and common sense. They coordinated attacks using methods that seemed to involve turning chaos into a weapon. Nick's team approached the first mining installation through a canyon filled with toxic gas clouds. Most species would have needed breathing apparatus and protective suits. The humans just adjusted their equipment settings and kept moving. When they encountered Zephyrian patrol units, the battles were over before the enemy could call for help. Target the slave processing center first, Nick ordered over the radio. We need to shut down those neural modification machines before they hurt more people. Lieutenant Rachel Moore piloted a dropship through airspace that was supposed to be controlled by enemy aircraft. She flew through clouds of poisonous vapor and navigated around floating chunks of debris that would have destroyed any normal vehicle. When Zephyrian fighters tried to intercept her, she outmaneuvered them in ways that broke several laws of physics. Bulldog, this is Skyrider, Rachel called over the radio. I have visual on the processing center. Looks like they have about 1,000 enslaved Villani working in the facility. I am dropping your team at the back entrance. The dropship landed in a crater that had been blown in the facility's outer wall by Nick's explosives. The human assault team poured out of the aircraft and moved through the complex like a force of nature. They had studied the facility layout during the flight down and knew exactly where to go. The Zephyrians inside the processing center had never encountered anything like humans. These beings moved too fast, hit too hard, and seemed to enjoy the fighting. They used weapons that fired bullets, explosives, and energy beams with equal effectiveness. They worked together like parts of a machine, but each individual soldier could adapt and improvise in ways that confused the hive mind. Nick led his team to the central control room, where banks of neural modification equipment hummed with malevolent energy. Thousands of Villani workers moved through the facility with dead eyes and vacant expressions, their minds controlled by Zephyrian technology. Amy, we found the neural control systems, Nick reported through his radio. How do we shut this down without hurting the victims? Dr. Amy Roberts had been monitoring the mission from the ship. The control signals are broadcast from a central transmitter. If you can destroy the main antenna array, the modifications should become inactive. The Villani will regain control of their minds. Nick looked around the control room until he found what he was looking for. A massive antenna array rose from the center of the facility, pulsing with energy as it broadcast control signals to thousands of enslaved minds. He pulled out a block of military-grade explosives and set the timer for 30 seconds. All teams, this is Bulldog. Clear the facility. We are about to turn off their mind control network the human way. The explosion could be seen from orbit. The antenna array disappeared in a ball of fire and smoke, and immediately the enslaved Villani throughout the facility stopped moving. For a moment they stood still like statues. Then they began to blink and look around with confusion. Their minds their own again for the first time in months. Similar explosions erupted at the other two processing centers as human teams destroyed the neural control systems. Across the planet, 50,000 Villani suddenly remembered who they were and what had been done to them. In space above the planet, Captain Danny Brooks watched the enemy fleet continue to crumble under his assault. The Zephyrians were learning that humans did not just fight wars. They solved problems by removing them completely. "Captain," Kate called from her station, "I am detecting a large vessel moving toward us from the far side of the system. It appears to be their command ship." Danny looked at the tactical display. The new contact was 3 times the size of any ship they had faced so far, bristling with weapons and heavy armor. It was probably where the hive mind's primary consciousness was located. The Zephyrian command ship was a massive thing that looked like a metal cathedral built for war. It dwarfed every other vessel in the system. Its black hull covered with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop small suns. Inside its core, the Queen Mind sat in a chamber filled with thousands of smaller minds, all connected to her consciousness through organic cables that pulsed with dark energy. For the first time in her long existence, the Queen Mind felt something she had never experienced before: fear. These creatures from the Death World had destroyed half her fleet in less than an hour. They fought with a brutality and efficiency that defied everything she understood about warfare. Worse, they had freed her slaves, breaking neural connections that should have been impossible to sever. She reached out with her mind to the remaining ships in her fleet. The response was chaos. Her captains were reporting impossible things. Human soldiers who breathed toxic atmosphere without protection. Weapons that punched through armor like it was made of cloth. Tactics that seemed to turn the laws of physics into suggestions. The Queen Mind made a decision that went against every instinct her species possessed. She activated the slave soldiers on the surface of Cathara Prime, the newly freed Villani. Were beginning to remember who they were when alarms began sounding throughout the ruined cities. From hidden bunkers and underground facilities, thousands of figures began emerging. They were not Zephyrians. They were members of other species that the hive mind had conquered over the decades. Villani from earlier captures, but also beings from 17 other worlds. All of them had neural implants that were harder to remove, deeper connections that the Queen Mind could still control. They moved with the jerky motions of puppets, their eyes empty but their bodies carrying weapons. The Queen Mind forced them to attack the human ground teams, knowing that these Deathworlders would hesitate to kill innocent victims. She was wrong. Sergeant Nick Campbell was placing explosives on a mining platform when the first wave of slave soldiers appeared. He saw immediately what they were and keyed his radio. "All teams, this is Bulldog. We have enslaved civilians moving to attack us. Repeat, we have innocent hostiles incoming." The response came from Dr. Amy Roberts aboard the Retribution. She had been analyzing the neural control systems during the battle. "Nick, those are deeper implants, more sophisticated than the others, but I can see them on my scanners. The control devices are visible as small metal objects behind the left ear of each victim." Nick looked through his rifle scope at the approaching figures. Sure enough, there were tiny metal devices attached to their heads, glowing with faint energy. "Can we remove them?" he asked. "Yes, but it requires precision. You need to destroy the device without harming the victim." The implants are small and the targets are moving, Nick smiled. Precision shooting was something humans were very good at. All teams, new mission parameters. We are performing emergency surgery on moving targets. Aim for the control implants only. Do not hit the victims. Make every shot count. What followed was a demonstration of human marksmanship that would become legendary among the galaxy's military academies. Human soldiers, fighting in hostile conditions while under attack, began shooting tiny electronic devices off the heads of moving targets from distances that should have made such precision impossible. Each shot that hit an implant freed another mind. The enslaved beings would stumble, blink in confusion, and then either run for cover or turn to fight against their former controllers. Within minutes, the Queen Mind's slave army was falling apart as humans systematically severed her control connections. Lieutenant Rachel Moore was flying air support when she received an urgent message from the ground teams. Skyrider, we have a problem. Enemy reinforcements are coming up from underground facilities. Looks like they have been hiding reserve forces in bunkers beneath the cities. Rachel banked her aircraft and looked down at the surface. Holes were opening in the ground across the continent, and streams of Zephyrian soldiers were pouring out like insects from a disturbed nest. There were thousands of them, all moving toward the human positions. Bulldog, this is Skyrider. I count at least 10,000 enemy troops moving to your position. You're about to be seriously outnumbered. Nick's response was calm. Copy that, Skyrider. Looks like we get to test the new toys after all. The new toys were something that Tony Martinez had been working on for months. Portable fusion charges that could be dropped from aircraft and programmed to create custom-shaped explosions. They were designed to collapse underground tunnel systems without damaging surface structures. Rachel armed the fusion charges and began her attack run. All ground teams, take cover. I'm about to rearrange the local geography. The explosions that followed could be felt across the continent. The fusion charges detonated in precise sequences, collapsing the underground tunnel networks and trapping most of the Zephyrian reinforcements before they could reach the surface. The few thousand that made it out found themselves facing human soldiers who had been expecting them in space above the planet. Captain Danny Brooks was dealing with his own problems. The Zephyrian command ship had opened fire with weapons that made the rest of their fleet look like toys. Energy beams that could melt asteroids struck the Retribution's shields, causing power fluctuations throughout the ship. Shields holding at 60%, Tony Martinez reported from engineering. But those are some serious weapons they are throwing at us. I do not know how long we can take this kind of punishment. Commander Kate Sullivan was studying the enemy vessel, looking for weaknesses. Captain, their command ship is heavily armored, but I am detecting a vulnerable spot. They have a massive power core at the center of the vessel. If we could get through their shields and hit it directly, the explosion would destroy the entire ship. Danny nodded. What do we need to do? We need to get close, very close. Close enough that their heavy weapons cannot target us effectively. Then we hit them with everything we have at point-blank range. Danny looked at the tactical display. The enemy command ship was still firing at them with weapons that could destroy the Retribution if too many hits got through their shields. Getting close to that monster would be extremely dangerous. How close? He asked. About 50 meters, Kate replied. Danny grinned. 50 meters? That is practically kissing distance. All right, people, strap yourselves in. We are going to ram. Speed and see if we can give the Queen Mind a heart attack. The Retribution's engines roared to full power, and the ship accelerated toward the massive enemy vessel like a bullet fired from a gun. The Zephyrian heavy weapons tried to track them, but the human ship was moving too fast and changing direction too often to get a clean shot. Smaller weapons opened fire as they got closer, filling the space between the ships with energy beams and explosive projectiles. The Retribution's shields flared and sparked as they absorbed the incoming fire, but the ship kept coming at the last second. Danny ordered full reverse thrust, and the Retribution slammed to a stop less than 50 meters from the command ship's hull. At this range, they were inside the enemy's shield perimeter and too close for the heavy weapons to target them. All weapons fire. Danny ordered. Every gun on the Retribution opened fire simultaneously. Plasma cannons, kinetic weapons, missile systems, and experimental energy weapons that Tony had been saving for a special occasion. All of them focused on a single point on the enemy hull, the spot where Kate's scans had detected the power core. The Zephyrian command ship's armor began to glow and melt under the concentrated fire. Metal flowed like liquid as human weapons burned through layers of protection that had been designed to stop planetary bombardments. Deeper and deeper the weapons cut, until finally they reached the massive fusion reactor at the ship's heart. The Queen Mind had time for one last thought before her ship exploded. She wondered what kind of species could produce beings so ruthless that they would ram a ship 50 times their size just to get a clean shot at its weak point. The explosion lit up the entire system. The command ship came apart like a flower made of fire, sending debris flying in all directions. The Queen Mind and her thousands of connected consciousnesses died instantly, and with them every remaining neural implant in the system went dead. On the planet's surface, the last enslaved beings suddenly found their minds free again. They looked around in confusion, trying to remember who they were and where they came from. For the first time in decades, some of them were able to think their own thoughts. The remaining Zephyrian ships in the system suddenly found themselves without central coordination. The hive mind that had controlled them was gone, and they had no experience operating as individuals. Some tried to flee. Others drifted aimlessly through space. A few continued fighting, but without coordination. They were quickly destroyed by human forces. Danny stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the last enemy ships either surrender or explode. Around them, the space above Cathara Prime was filled with debris and the fading light of explosions. The battle was over. Status report, Danny ordered. Elder Velanara stood in the Crystal Gardens for the first time in 3 months, watching her people emerge from the ice caves like flowers blooming after a long winter. The gardens were damaged but not destroyed. The singing crystals that had taken generations to grow were broken in many places, but their roots were still alive in the soil. They could be REGROWN. Around her, freed Vellani walked through their ruined cities with wonder in their eyes. They were thin and tired, but they were alive and their minds were their own. Some cried as they remembered what had been done to them. Others simply stood in the sunlight, grateful to feel its warmth without the constant buzzing of control implants in their heads. The humans had been working for 3 days to clear the debris and help with the immediate needs of the survivors. Elder Velanara watched them with amazement. These beings who had fought with such terrible efficiency were now helping to rebuild with the same focused energy. They worked alongside Vellani engineers to restore power systems, shared their medical supplies with anyone who needed them, and treated the freed slaves from other worlds with gentle care. Dr. Amy Roberts had set up a field hospital in what used to be the capital city's central plaza. She worked around the clock, treating beings from 18 different species who had been freed from Zephyrian control. Many of them had been slaves for so long that they had forgotten their own names or where they came from. Amy and her team were helping them remember using a combination of medical treatment and careful psychological care. The neural damage is not permanent, Amy explained to Velanara as they walked through the hospital. The Zephyrian implants suppressed memory and personality, but they did not destroy them. Most of these people will recover completely given time and proper care. They stopped at a bed where a young Vellani was sitting up and eating solid food for the first time in months. His name was Korthel, and he had been one of the first to be enslaved when the Zephyrians arrived. Now he was asking questions about his family and his work in the Crystal Gardens. How long will it take? Velanara asked. For full recovery, maybe 6 months for most people. A year for those who were enslaved longer. But they will recover. The human brain is remarkably resilient, and I suspect Vellani minds are similar. Velanara nodded. 6 months seemed like nothing compared to the eternity of slavery they had faced just a week ago. Captain? Danny Brooks found her there in the hospital, talking with Dr. Roberts about long-term care for the survivors. He looked different without his combat armor. Smaller somehow, more like a normal person instead of a walking weapon. But his eyes still held the same steady confidence that had given her hope in the ice caves. "Elder Velinara," Danny said, giving her a small bow of respect. "I wanted to speak with you before we leave." "You are leaving?" Velinara felt a spike of fear. But what if they come back? What if there are more of them? Danny's expression was grim. "There are more of them. 17 other worlds, according to the intelligence we gathered from their command ship. But they will not be coming back here. Ever." He gestured toward the sky, where the Retribution hung in orbit like a metal guardian. "We are leaving a monitoring station in your system. It will watch for any threats and call for help if needed. We are also leaving enough supplies and equipment to help you rebuild. But the main thing you need to know is this: the Zephyrians are finished." "What do you mean?" Velinara asked. Commander Kate Sullivan, who had been standing quietly nearby, spoke up. "We mean that we are not stopping here. The human Third Fleet is already moving toward the other 17 systems where the Zephyrians have established themselves. Each one will receive the same treatment this system got." "All of them?" Velinara could barely believe what she was hearing. "You are going to free all the worlds they have conquered?" Danny nodded. "The Zephyrian species will be extinct within 6 months. Every hive ship, every processing facility, every control implant, all of it gone. They made the mistake of hurting people we have decided to protect." Velinara stared at him. "But there must be millions of them across all those systems. The cost, in ships and lives, will be minimal," Kate said with confidence. "We know their tactics now. We know their weaknesses. And most importantly, they cannot adapt fast enough to counter human strategy. Each battle will be easier than the last one." Danny handed Velinara a small communication device. "This is a direct link to human space. If you ever need help again, for any reason, just press the button. Someone will answer, and if necessary, someone will come." Velinara took the device with shaking hands. "Why are you doing this?" "We have nothing to offer you in return. We're just farmers and artists." Danny smiled, and for the first time since she had met him, it was a warm smile instead of a dangerous one. "Elder Velinara, you asked for help. That is all the reason humans need. We do not help people because of what they can give us. We help them because it is the right thing to do." He paused and looked around at the recovering city. "Besides, farmers and artists are exactly the kind of people who make the galaxy worth protecting." 3 days later, the Retribution departed from the Cathara system. Velinara stood in the crystal gardens, now partially cleared of debris, and watched the human ship disappear into hyperspace. She was not sad to see them go. She knew they would keep their promise. News of what had happened in the Cathara system spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication. The story grew with each telling, but the basic facts remained the same. The humans had responded to a distress call by eliminating an entire species that had been terrorizing the galaxy for decades. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to discuss the implications. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to debate what this meant for galactic politics and law. Some argued that the humans had acted beyond their authority. Others pointed out that the Council had declared the Zephyrian situation too dangerous to handle, so the humans had simply handled it themselves. Ambassador Lisa Hayes represented humanity at the Council session. She was Admiral Morrison's daughter and had inherited his talent for clear, direct communication. When asked to explain human actions in the Cathara system, her response was simple. "The Villani asked for help, we helped them. The Zephyrians were enslaving innocent people, we stopped them. If the Council has a problem with that, the Council is welcome to handle similar situations themselves in the future." The counselor from Zarian, a species known for their careful legal thinking, asked the question that everyone was wondering about. "Ambassador Hayes, what gives humans the right to eliminate an entire species?" Lisa's answer became one of the most quoted statements in galactic history. "Counselor, we did not eliminate them because we had the right. We eliminated them because we had the ability and they needed to be stopped." Sometimes the right thing to do and the legal thing to do are not the same thing. Humans choose to do what is right. The debate continued for weeks, but it became academic very quickly. True to their word, human fleets systematically visited every system where the Zephyrians had established themselves. Each time, the result was the same: complete elimination of the Zephyrian presence, and freedom for all enslaved populations. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was gone within 4 months. The humans documented everything they found, cataloged every crime, and provided detailed reports to the Galactic Council. They also provided medical care, rebuilding supplies, and monitoring stations to every liberated world. Elder Velanara received regular updates about the human operations. Each message brought news of another system freed, another slave population liberated. She kept track of the numbers in a journal that she planned to give to the Crystal Garden archives. By the time the humans were finished, they had freed over 3 million enslaved beings from 47 different species across 18 star systems. The total human casualties for the entire campaign were listed as 47 wounded and 3 killed. Zephyrian casualties were listed simply as total. 1 year after the first distress call from Cathara Prime, Velanara stood in the crystal gardens again. The singing crystals had been replanted and were beginning to grow. The cities were rebuilt and full of life. The freed beings from other worlds had been reunited with their families, or, in cases where that was impossible, welcomed into Vellani society. The communication device that Captain Brooks had given her sat on her desk, unused but always within reach. She had never needed to press the button, but knowing it was there made her feel safe. She was writing in her journal when a message arrived from the Galactic Council. It was brief and formal, but the meaning was clear. The Council was updating their databases to reflect recent changes in galactic politics. Next to the entry for human space, they had added a new notation: allied species under human protection are not to be threatened under any circumstances. Violations will result in immediate human intervention. Velanara smiled as she read the message. She understood what it really meant. The galaxy had learned something important about the species from the Deathworld. When humans decided to protect something, they protected it completely and permanently.